If Runa had kept her scarf, the smallest pup in the litter would have been dead by morning, and no one would ever have thought to trouble her about it again. But then, if the warden mother had sent down even half the blankets the dens were promised that winter, there would have been no reason for Runa to give away the one warm thing she owned. So if a person followed the whole tangle back to its root, the matter was hardly Runa's fault at all. It was a comforting thought. It was also entirely useless, because something had been watching from the snow the whole while, and it had already made up its mind. The dens lay at the foot of Rimehold, cut into the black rock under the ice, and they were where the Reach kept whatever it had stopped finding a use for, the old and the broken, the orphaned young that no pack had come to claim. Runa had learned not to count how many times a day she reminded herself that she belonged among them now. Because the counting never once made it easier, she had been a warden before. One of the scouts who ran the long white miles of the Whitewood and came home with the shape of the border held whole in her head. Then there had been a night she did not let herself think about, a run gone wrong, and good wolves who did not come back, and a hearing where no one quite said the word blame, while everyone in the room breathed it. After that, they had given her the dens. It was not a punishment, the warden mother had told her, gently, which was how Runa understood exactly that it was. She did not mind the young did not know what she had done. They knew only that she was warm and that her hands were careful, and to a creature small enough to fit in 2 palms, that was the whole of a person's worth. What she minded was the thread. Every wolf in the Reach spoke of it as though it were weather, plain, and shared and certain, the pull that woke in your chest when the one meant for you came near. Runa had waited for hers the way a child waits for a season that has been described to them but never arrives. She had waited through her whole youth, and through the training yards and through the long border years, and it had never come. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped waiting and called it peace, and most nights the lie held. The storm came down out of the north 3 nights after the turn of the deep cold. It came the way the worst ones always did, without any hurry at all, filling the sky with a soft gray nothing until the world past the den mouth was only white and the sound of white. It was near the middle watch when the color brought the litter in. There were 4 of them hauled down from a croft on the high border, where the mother had been lost and no one had the milk or the will to spare. 3 were sturdy enough, squalling and furious and alive. The 4th they set apart on the cold end of the straw, because there was no sense wasting warmth on a pup that would not last the night. He was the smallest thing Runa had ever seen wear the shape of a wolf. His ribs moved too fast and then too slow. His eyes stayed shut. When she lifted him, he weighed almost nothing, and the almost was the part that undid her. She should have left him. Every hard and sensible law of the dens said to leave him, to keep the warmth for the ones with a chance. Runa unwound the scarf from her own throat instead. It was gray wool gone soft with years, the only thing she owned that had been made for her, and not issued to her, and she wrapped the dying pup in it, close, until only the black tip of his nose showed, and she held him against the beat of her own heart, where it was warmest. For a long while, nothing changed. The wind said its one long word outside. The other 3 slept. Runa sat with the small weight going cold and colder in her arms, and told herself she was a fool, and did not put him down. A real breath, deep and greedy, and another after it, and something in the pup turned toward her that had nothing to do with warmth. She felt it before she understood it. A small, fierce tug at the center of her, a heat with a direction to it, reaching out of the bundle in her arms and straight into the hollow place she had given up on years before. It was faint as a candle at the far end of a hall. It was, past all argument, the thread. Runa stopped breathing herself. It was not possible. The thread woke between mates, between grown wolves whose souls had gone looking, and found each other at last. It did not wake for a half-frozen runt and a scout the whole reach knew to be Bon dead. And yet, there it was, plain and warm and impossible, and the pup pressed his nose into the wool and slept as though he had chosen her out of the whole wide world. She was so lost in it that she did not notice the tree line for far too long. When she finally looked up, the white, beyond the den mouse, was not empty. A wolf stood at the edge of the black wood where the snow ran out, and it was the largest she had ever seen, pale as the storm and near invisible against it, so that at first she took it for a trick the cold plays on tired eyes. It was not a trick, it was watching her. Not the litter, not the dens, her, and the small, warm weight in her arms, with eyes the color of ice over deep water, patient and unhurried and wholly awake. A lone wolf, she told herself. Come down for the smell of the young. She ought to raise the alarm. She did not. She could not have said why, except that the creature made no move toward her, and something in the set of it did not read as hunger. She held the pup tighter. When she blinked, the tree line was empty, the snow already closing over the place where the wolf had stood as though it had never been there at all. The runt lived through the night, curled in her scarf against her heart, the impossible thread holding fast between them. And out in the white, moving down toward the hold, with the same unhurried certainty she had seen in those pale eyes, something that had watched the whole of it was already coming to find her. Morning in the dens was gray light and the smell of straw and warm milk, and by the time it arrived, everyone already knew. Runa could not work out how. She had told no one. But word in the dens moved the way meltwater moves under snow, unseen and everywhere at once. And when she carried the runt out to the warming pen, the looks followed her, quick and sidelong, and the murmur fell quiet wherever she came near and started up again behind her back. Rue found her first. Rue had trained with her in the border years and had come down to the dens after her out of a loyalty Runa had never felt she had earned, and Rue at least walked straight at a thing instead of circling it. "Is it true?" she said, low, crouching by the pen. "They are saying, the little one took to you. Took, properly, like a thread. He is warm and I am warm," Runa said. "Pups are not particular." Rue looked at the pup, who had wedged himself into the crook of Runa's arm and showed no intention of being anywhere else ever again. "Runa, you cannot feel the thread. You have said so for years. I know what I have said." "Then what is that?" Runa had no answer. That was not impossible, so she gave none, and Rue, who knew her, let it lie. Bram was younger and kind, and could not hold a thought behind his teeth to save his life, and by the middle of the morning, he had said aloud the very word Runa had been refusing to think. "A bond," he breathed, delighted and appalled at once. "A true one on you. Do you have any idea how strange that is? Wolves are going to want to look at you now, the sort of wolves who never come down here." "Then they will be disappointed," Runa said, "because there is nothing to look at. He is a runt who wants his dinner. Leave it, Bram." But Bram was right, and she knew he was right, and it settled in her stomach like swallowed ice. She had spent a whole year making herself small and quiet and useful. A wolf the Reach could comfortably forget it had, because being forgotten was the last mercy left to a scout who had gotten wolves killed. An impossible bond was the loudest thing she could possibly have done. It would haul her name back up into the light, and there was nothing waiting in the light for her but the old question, patient as ever. She named the pup Cinder that afternoon, without quite deciding to, because he had crawled to the very lip of the hearth and sat there glaring at the flames as though he meant to fight them and win, and the name was out of her before she thought better of it. Naming a thing was a promise. She knew that. She made it anyway. The summons came at the turn of the light. It was a den runner, breathless, and the message was only that the warden mother wished to see her, at once. Runa handed Cinder across to Rue and went, and the whole cold walk up through the lower passages she tried to read the shape of what was coming, and could not. The warden mother's name was Verena, And she had pulled Runa, half frozen out of the snow as a foundling near 13 winters gone, and made a warden of a girl who would otherwise have amounted to nothing at all. There was no one in the whole reach Runa trusted further. So when she stepped into the small stone room and found Verena standing at the narrow window with her hands folded and her face drawn tight, the fear that opened in Runa was not fear of any punishment. It was the older and worse fear of having failed the one wolf who had ever believed in her. "Tell me it is not true," Verena said, without turning. "Tell me the whole hold has it wrong. I do not know what the hold is saying." That a bond woke on you. Down here, on a cold runt. Now she turned, and there was something in her eyes Runa had never seen in them, a fear that did not fit the calm and careful woman she knew. "Is it true?" Runa thought of the small worm tug still there, at the center of her, faint and steady as a banked coal. She could have lied. She found that to this face, she could not. "Something happened," she said. "I do not understand it, but yes." Something did. Verena shut her eyes. When she opened them, she crossed the room and took Runa's face in both her cold hands, and her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Then you will tell no one else. Do you hear me? You will bury it. You will say the pup is fond, and you are soft, and there is no more to it than that, and you will let them forget you again, quickly, before the wrong ears hear a word." Her thumbs pressed hard along Runa's cheekbones. "Some things are safer left unseen. You of all wolves ought to know that." "You are frightening me," Runa said. "Good," said Verena. "Be frightened. It will keep you careful." Runa opened her mouth to ask the question rising in her. Why? Why does a warm thread on a lonely scout put such fear in you? And she never got to ask it. Because that was the moment the great horn of Rimehold sounded from the upper gate. It was not a call that anyone had planned. Runa knew the horns of the hold, the way she knew her own pulse, the watch changes and the muster calls, and the long single note that meant a death, and this was none of them. This was arrival. High and formal, and stopping every wolf in the passage where they stood, an arrival that had gone clean over the head of the warden mother herself, over every officer in the hold, which in all the reach answered to only one wolf. Verena's hands went still against Runa's face. Runa watched the same impossible thought reach her a breath after it reached Runa, and drain her the color of the snow outside. The king was coming down. And Runa, standing frozen in that small stone room, could not for the life of her stop seeing a pair of pale eyes at the edge of a black wood, patient and unhurried, watching her across the falling white. He came down through the dens like weather, and the dens changed around him. Runa felt it before she saw him, the way the air pulled taut, and her own wolf lifted its head beneath her skin and came to an attention she had not asked it for. Every wolf in the lower passage had gone to one knee. She went down with them, a beat late, her heart slamming, and fixed her eyes on the straw. She had known, of course, that the Reach had a king. She had stood in the muster yard on crowning day years before and watched a distant figure raise a hand from a high wall. She had passed his face on the coins she was paid in, and the banners she had marched beneath. What none of it had readied her for was the weight of him in a low stone room. The others spoke of their King Aldrich as young, new to the crown, a shade careless, more given to feasts than to the dull grind of ruling. The wolf who came down the passage was young. Yes, and there was an ease to him, an unhurried grace, a mouth that looked built around a joke. But under the ease sat something that did not match it in the least, a stillness, a certainty. The settled weight of a wolf who had never in his life needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. His eyes were pale as ice over deep water. Runa went cold to the bone. She knew those eyes. She had watched them, watch her across a field of falling snow, and told herself they belonged to a lone wolf, and she had been wrong. "There she is," the king said. He said it warmly, easily, as though he had come a long, cold way for the simple pleasure of it, and he crossed the room to where she knelt and stopped in front of her, and the whole hold held its breath. "You may stand," he said. "I would rather not address the top of your head, fine head though it plainly is." She stood. Up close he was worse. Up close there was no wall left to set between herself and the plain fact of him. "Your name," he said. "Runa, Majesty." "Runa!" He turned it over as though it pleased him. Then he turned, unhurried, to the frozen ranks of the dens, to the officers hurrying down far too late, to the warden mother arriving white-faced at the passage mouth, and he lifted his voice just enough to carry to the back of the stone. "You will all have heard a strange thing by now, that a bond has woken here, in the dens, where not one of you thought to look for such a thing. I have come down to tell you it is no rumor." His hand settled, light and certain, against the back of Runa's neck. "It woke to me." The room did not breathe. Runa stood inside the lie and felt precisely nothing. No thread ran between herself and the wolf at her side. She would have staked her life on it. Whatever faint, warm tug she carried ran to a sleeping runt 3 passages down and nowhere else in the world. And this wolf, this king, knew it and stood here before his whole hold, and named a bond that did not exist as though it were the plainest truth in the reach. "Majesty," said Verena, and her voice was very carefully level, "you honor us beyond our deserving, but surely there has been some mistake. Runa is mine," the king said pleasantly, and the one word shut the sentence like a door. "I know what she is. She is the wolf. A bond saw fit to choose. I should think that outranks whatever else the roster has to say of her." He smiled down at Runa, and only she stood near enough to see that the smile never reached the ice of his eyes, that behind all the easy charm he was watching her, exactly as she had seen him watch her across the snow, weighing, measuring, following some thread of his own that had nothing to do with any bond. "We will be wed before the thaw," he told the room. "See that she is housed and treated as what she now is, a wife." In the space of a breath and 10 short words, he had made her the intended of the king of all the reach, before a room full of witnesses, who would carry it into every corner of the hold by nightfall. Runa's protest died somewhere below her throat. To deny the bond now in this room was to name the king a liar to his own face before his own people, and she had seen what became of wolves who dared far less. She understood, dimly and all at once, that she had just been caught in a snare, and that the wolf, who had set it, had done the whole thing smiling. He crouched then, without warning, easy, as water finding its level, so that his pale eyes came even with hers, and his voice dropped low enough that it reached no one else. "You gave your own scarf to a dying thing in a storm," he murmured, "when you believed that not a soul alive was watching, and it lived. I have been trying to call to mind the last time I saw a wolf do a kind thing with nothing to gain by it. I could not, so I came down to see the one who could." He rose again before she could shape an answer, and the charm slid back over him, smooth as a drawn cloak. "I will send for you," he said, to the room now light and careless as a wolf discussing the weather. "My bride and I have a great deal to speak of." Then he was climbing back up through the dens, taking all the taut weight of the air out with him, and the passage let go of its held breath, and every wolf in it turned as one to stare at Runa where she stood. Verena reached her through the press and gripped her arm hard enough to leave a bruise. "Say nothing," she breathed. "Do nothing. God's Runa, of all the wolves in the reach for him to fix upon." But Runa was not listening. Runa stood very still in the middle of the murmuring dens, with a lie settling heavy across her shoulders, turning one cold certainty over and over in her mind, like a stone worn smooth in the palm. There was no bond. She could not feel the faintest thread of him, and he knew it. And he had stood before his whole hold and sworn to one all the same, which meant the king wanted something of her, something worth a lie of that size and that weight. And she had until the thaw to work out what it was, before whatever he was truly hunting down here in the cold and the dark finally closed its jaws. They gave her a chamber in the upper hold, with a real window and a real hearth, and a door that locked from the inside which Runa did not trust in the slightest. For 3 days she waited in it, like a held breath. Cinder she had refused to leave behind, and no one had quite dared tell the king's own intended that she could not keep a runt in her rooms, so the pup came with her, and grew, and glared at the fine new fire, exactly as he had glared at the old one. On the 4th day, the summons came. A servant led her up through halls she had only ever guarded from the wrong side of, to a small warm room, high in the hold where Aldrich sat with his boots off and his sleeves pushed back, reading by the window as though he had all the time in the world, and meant to waste every hour of it. "You look," he said, not glancing up, "as though you have come to be sentenced. Have I not? Sit. There is food and you are allowed to eat it. I promise it is not a trick, though I do see why you would suspect one." He set the paper down and looked at her, and there it was again, the ease laid thin over the weight, the pale eyes far too awake for the lazy set of his mouth. "You want to ask me what I am playing at? I want you to tell me," Runa said, "why the King of the Reach walked into a den full of culled pups and swore a bond to the wolf who got her own patrol killed. It is not fate, Majesty. Whatever this is, it is not that. I would feel a bond." "I feel nothing at all." She had braced for the charm, to slide over it. Instead, he went quiet, watching her. And when he spoke, the lightness had thinned out of his voice. "And if I told you that you are wrong about the nothing," he said, "that there is a great deal you are not feeling, and that the not feeling is by far the strangest thing about you. What would you say to that?" "I would say you speak in riddles, when you do not wish to answer." "I do. It is one of my very worst habits." The smile came back, and the moment shut like a book. "Ask me something else." So she asked him the things she had carried for a year, because she had nothing left to lose, and the strange wine of being wanted had gone to her head with no wine in it at all. "Do you know what the wardens on the high border are owed each winter, and what they are truly sent? Do you know that the dens beg for blankets and burn old straw instead? Do you know that half of what the Reach sets aside for the wolves who keep it breathing never arrives, and no one above the dens has ever cared to ask where it goes?" Her voice had climbed, and she could not haul it back down. "You sit up here fond over your feasts, while the floor of your own house rots through beneath you. A king ought to know what happens under his own roof." The words came out too smooth, too worn, and some far and sober corner of her noticed that they did not sound like her own, that they arrived in another wolf's cadence, though she could not have said whose. She was too angry to hold on to the thought and let it go. Aldrich did not laugh. He did not go cold. He set his chin on his hand and studied her as though she had handed him the end of a thread. He had been hunting a long while. "Du maire." "Show me," he said. "Majesty, you have made an accusation and I find that I believe you, which is inconvenient for the both of us. So, show me the tallies, the books, whatever you keep down there. What is owed against what comes? And we will see with our own eyes whether it is neglect or something with sharper teeth." Every trace of mischief had gone out of him. What remained was direct and a little grim. "I have never once stood where you stand. That is not a thing I am proud of. Teach me the shape of it." So she took him down. She had meant to march him through it like an inspection, cold and correct. But the moment she opened the tally book on the low stone table, something in her loosened that a year of being small had kept clenched tight. She showed him the columns. 40 blankets asked for, 12 cent. Milk and lamp, oil and mending wire, every month the same. The promised amount, and then the thin trickle that actually came and the gap between them, wide enough to lose a season in. Aldrich read it the way she read a tree line. His thumb stopped partway down a page. "Who signs the release when the stores go out?" he asked, not looking up. "And who holds the seal for it when the warden mother is away from the hold?" "Whoever is nearest and feeling grand," she said, drier than she meant. He laughed, a real one, surprised out of him. and she felt the answering pull at the corner of her own mouth before she could stop it. For a moment they were only two wolves bent close over a book in the lamplight, shoulder near to shoulder, and she forgot to be afraid of him. Then Cinder, tucked warm inside the front of her coat, went rigid against her ribs and snarled. It was a small sound, a runt's sound, but it came down the thread between them sharp as a struck bell, and Runa was already moving before she knew why. She caught Aldrich by the collar and hauled him sideways off the bench. The bolt meant for the back of his skull, buried itself in the tally book with a wet crack, and stood there quivering. "Down," she breathed. "Stay at the wall. Do not move where I cannot see you." They came out of the dark of the lower passage, all at once. 4 of them. Blades, bare, faces, wrapped. She met the first before he cleared the arch, turned his wrist, put an elbow through his guard, and a knee into the wall behind him. The second she took low, the third came for Aldrich, and she crossed the space without deciding to, took the cut meant for him across her own forearm, and broke the wolf's wrist under her hand like a green stick. A whistle split the dark, short and clean, and the two still standing broke off as one, not fleeing so much as withdrawing. A neat and disciplined thing that frightened her far more than panic would have. Silence fell back over the passage. Her arm was on fire. Nothing else moved. "Well," said Aldrich from the wall, brushing plaster from his sleeve. "You do know how to make an evening memorable." She stared at him. He was not shaking. His voice had not so much as caught. "You were not surprised," she said slowly. "Someone just put a bolt where your head was, and you are not surprised." Then the rest of it arrived. The hunt he had waved off. The accident he had told Verena not to lose sleep over. This is not the first time. Someone wants you dead, and you already knew it. For half a breath, something real moved behind the ice of his eyes. Then it was gone. "You are bleeding," he said gently. "Let me see to that arm." She did not give him her arm. She stood there in the ruined dark, holding a shaking pup and a wound she barely felt, and understood that she had just walked into the middle of something with far more teeth than neglect, and that the king had known it all along. For the better part of a month, Runa set herself to learning what the king was hiding, because it was the only sane answer to a wolf who had been shot at in his own hold, and laughed it into a joke. Someone wanted Aldrich dead. She was certain of it, so she did the thing she was good at. She watched, she gathered, she turned each new day over, looking for the seam. The king did not cooperate in the least. She would put a sharp question to him, and he would answer it with a jest. She would press, and he would slide the whole conversation sideways, so smoothly that she would not notice until it was 3 fields gone from where she had aimed it. She would corner him on the wolves who kept trying to kill him, and he would tell her she was magnificent when she was suspicious. He gave her nothing she could use, and a great deal she had no idea what to do with, because the longer she watched him for danger, the more she found she was simply watching him. It crept up on her the way a thaw does, unnoticed, until the ice is already going. He came to the dens at the cold end of the night watch with 2 cups of something hot, and sat on an upturned crate, and let Cinder chew his fingers, and asked her the pup's small history as though it mattered to him. He remembered what she told him. He came back the next night, and asked after the runt by name. He was easy with the broken, and the old down there, in a way no wolf raised to a crown had any right to be, and she caught herself, more than once, forgetting to look for the blade behind it. And under all of it ran the thing she could not solve, the thing that woke her in the dark and would not let her sleep. She wanted him. She lay in her fine new bed, with her whole body humming, and her thoughts gone straight to him, to his hands and the line of his throat, and a great deal more than his hands, and where the thread should have been, where by every law of her kind, a wanting this fierce ought to have lit a bond like a struck lamp. There was only the same silence there had always been. She wanted a wolf she could not feel. It was its own particular grief, and she had no one she could tell it to. It came to a head late in the disused watch loft above the mews, where she had gone to be alone and he had found her anyway. because he always found her. He came in and sat on the bench across from her with no papers, and no question about the border, nothing she could file the visit under, only him, in the lamplight, watching her, patient as the snow. "What do you want?" she said. It came out raw. "Every day, you will not say what you are after, and you will not leave me be, and I cannot keep standing in the middle of it. Tell me it is a scheme. Tell me you need a blade you can trust, and a face at your side that no one will question. Tell me anything that makes sense, because I am not built to want things I cannot have and you are making me want." She stopped. Too late. His head had come up. "Want what?" he said, low, and there was no teasing left in it. "Do not," she said. "You know what you have known for days. You have been enjoying it." He rose. He came around the bench slowly, the way you close on a thing that might bolt, and stopped near enough that she had to lift her chin to keep his eyes. "And what," he said, "if it is no scheme at all? What if I simply want you, Runa, for no cause, cleverer than that? Wolves like you do not want wolves like me." But it came out a whisper, and she was staring at his mouth again, and they both knew it. "You do not believe me." His voice had gone rough and quiet. "So tell me to go, and I will. I will walk out of here and never trouble you again. Or," he was very close now, "ask me to prove it." The loft was very quiet. "Prove it," she heard herself say. He kissed her, and every careful, guarded thing in her went white and silent at once. His hand slid into her hair and his mouth was warm and certain and unhurried, and there was no audience for it, no hold watching, no crown between them. There was only the two of them and the lamplight and the sudden total fact of him. Her heart forgot its steady work. She had held herself apart from wolves for a whole cold year, and now, for the space of one breath and the next, she let herself simply be held. When she drew back, it was only far enough to rest her brow against his, both of them unsteady, both of them breathing as though they had run a long way to get here. Runa had been wanted for her blade, for her watch, for the use of her. She had never in her life stood in the plain warm light of being wanted for no reason but herself, and it undid something in her that a year of being small had wound too tight. "Stay," she said. It was the bravest word she had spoken in months, and it came out barely above a whisper. "I am not going anywhere," he said against her hair. And the certainty in it settled over her like a blanket drawn up in the dark. She believed him. That was the frightening thing. For once, she let herself believe him. This was no scheme. She was sure of it, surer than she had been of anything in a long and lonely year. This was not strategy, and it was not use. This was only a wolf who wanted her for the plain fact of her, and God's help her. She wanted him back. For once in her life, she stopped keeping score and let herself be glad. Runa had stood guard at the edge of 100 feasts. She had never been a guest at one, and now here she was in blue that did not feel like hers, at the high table of the hold, while the delegation from the Greymark filled the hall with strange furs and stranger accents and the careful smiles of wolves come to weigh a treaty. It mattered, this one. Aldrich had told her as much in the gray before dawn, her head resting against his shoulder in the quiet before the hold woke. The Greymark held the western ice, and the old peace between the two packs had worn thin as spring snow, and Elder Ostrid had come across the white to see with her own eyes whether the young king of the Reach was a wolf worth binding her people to, or a boy playing at a crown. "A wrong word this week," he had said, lightly, in the way he said the things that frightened him most, and there would be blood on the ice before the thaw. She caught his eye down the length of the table now, and he smiled at her, slow and private, the same smile he had given her that morning in the gray light, warm and unguarded, and the tight thing under her ribs eased. Later he drew her out onto a gallery where the music thinned and the night came up cold and clean off the gardens below. For a while, neither of them spoke. "You hate this," she said, watching him. She knew him now. She had spent the turning of the season, learning the shape of his laughter against her throat and the way he said her name in the dark, and she could tell the difference between the wolf who was enjoying himself and the wolf who was performing. "Hate is a strong word," he said, watching the dancers through the arch. "You are lying." He laughed, surprised. "Real. I am rather." He turned to her, and the easy charm went out of his face, and what was left underneath looked tired to the bone. "I have been doing this since I was 19. The smiling, the performing. Being the wolf they need to see, so they do not look too hard at the one I am not sure I am." He stopped, shook his head. The smile he put back on was thin and did not fit. "Never mind me. Too much wine and not near enough Aldrich." He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat, she watched him brace the way he always did when a thing came too near something true. She reached up and laid her hand along his face. His breath caught. The false smile came apart. "You are not the wolf they think you are," she said quietly. "You are so much more than the show you put on, and the one underneath it." She paused. "I like him a great deal." Something cracked open behind his eyes, and then, without warning, the numbness in her cracked with it. It came through the place where her palm met his cheek, a flood, sudden and total and entirely foreign, relief, fear. Something fierce and aching and tender, a warmth pouring straight into her out of him. It was not hers. She could feel him, his own heart laid bare and distinct and pressing at the edges of hers, as though a door she had never known was shut had blown open in a gale. The thread. For one impossible instant, the thread. Runa jerked her hand back with a gasp. Aldrich's eyes were blown wide. "Did you?" he started. "Runa, tell me you felt." Her heart was slamming so hard, she was sure he could hear it. Because if that was real, if that had been the thread, then everything she had believed about herself for her whole life was a lie, and she did not know how to stand in a world that had moved that far under her feet. "It was nothing," she heard herself say. "The wine, a trick of the cold. It was nothing." He went still. "Nothing," he repeated. The light went out of his face by careful degrees, and his voice changed, gone quiet and far away, the way it did when he was hurt and would rather die than show it. "Of course, you are right, nothing at all." A servant appeared at the mouth of the gallery with a tray, 2 cups of wine, dark as old blood in the moonlight. "Majesty," he murmured and offered it. Aldrich reached for a cup without looking, still watching her with that wounded quiet, and every instinct Runa owned stood straight up and screamed. She did not think. Her hand shot out and struck the cup from his fingers. It shattered on the stone, wine spreading black across the pale flags. "Do not," she said, and her voice did not sound like hers. She was already down in a crouch over the mess of it, her nose working, underneath the wine. She watched his nostrils flare as he caught it, the bitter edge hiding under the fruit and the oak. Wolfsbane, or near enough to it to stop an alpha's heart between one beat and the next. When she looked up, he had gone the color of the stone, staring at the broken cup as though it would not resolve into sense. "That was meant to drop you where you stood," she said, "perhaps for good." The servant was gone. Of course he was gone. That is the 3rd time. The hunt, the passage, now this. "Aldrich, someone in this hold is trying to kill you, and they are close enough to put it in your cup." His hand came down over hers, hard. "You will tell no one," he said, and his face had gone from stricken to something cold and rapid and calculating. "Not the watch, not Verena, no one. Do you understand me?" "No," she said, "I do not." "There is a foreign elder 50 steps that way, weighing whether my throat is worth the trust of her whole people," he said, low and fast. "If it gets out that I was nearly poisoned under my own roof at my own table, there will be no treaty, and a pack that smells weakness does not stay behind its own border. I will have a war by the turning of the moon. So yes, I will walk back in there, and I will smile, and I will dance, and you will say nothing, and you will trust me. Just this once. Can you do that?" Everything in her that was still a warden said no. But she could still feel the ghost of him against her palm, that flood of fear and warmth that was not hers. And so she heard herself say, "All right, I promise." He pressed his mouth to her brow, quick and grateful, and then the mask slid back over him whole, and he was the easy laughing king again as he stepped back into the light. She gave him a slow count of 30. Then she followed. She kept to the edges the way she had been trained, and watched him smile and deflect his way across the hall, and watched him slip through a side door, and watched the smile drop from his face, the instant he thought himself unseen. Her stomach dropped with it. She trailed him down 2 turns of stair into the cold lower halls, toward the records room where the warden mother kept the ledgers of the whole hold under lock. The door clicked shut behind him. For a long moment Runa stood in the dark of the corridor and could not make her legs obey. Then, very quietly, she crossed to the door and opened it. Aldrich stood behind Verina's desk. The locked drawer was open. There was a sheaf of the warden mother's private papers in his hand. He looked up, and for a long and breathless moment, neither of them moved. "Runa," he said, very calm, very steady. "This is not what it looks like." Aldrich never fumbled. He always had the answer before you had finished the question. But now he stood behind Verina's desk with a fistful of her papers, and he did not have one ready, and the not having it was the most frightening thing Runa had seen in the whole long night. "Say something," she begged him without a word. He said nothing. "Someone put wolfsbane in your cup an hour ago," she managed, at last. "You told me to keep silent. And then you came straight down here in the dark to go through the warden mother's private books. So tell me, Aldrich. Tell me what I am looking at." He set the papers down. When he spoke, his voice had gone quiet and awfully gentle, the smooth, careful one he used on frightened elders, and had not once used on her in weeks. "I have been investigating, Verina," he said. The words would not resolve into sense. They were only sounds. "Verina pulled me out of the snow," she said. "Verina made me. I know she did." He came around the desk, slow, and stopped the moment she stepped back. "The stores that never arrive, the blankets, the milk, the coin, set aside for the wardens who keep this hold breathing. It does not vanish, Runa, it is taken. For years it has been bled out of the dens and into hands that mean me harm. And the wolves, who have 3 times now tried to open my throat, carried coin that began its life in her ledgers. I have the trail. It ends at that desk." "You needed someone close to her," Runa heard her own voice say from very far off, "someone she trusted past all doubt. That is why you came down to the dens. That is why you stood before your whole hold and swore a bond you cannot even feel to a scout you had never spoken to. You needed her own foundling. You needed me." He did not deny it. He held her eyes and let the silence be the whole of his answer. "Say, I am wrong," she whispered. "Aldrich, say, I am wrong." He looked at her a long moment, and he did not say it. She pressed the heels of her hands hard against her eyes. And under the grief, cold and quiet, something else had begun to assemble itself. "Those things I threw at you," she said, "that the crown is fond of its feasts, that it lets the border rot, that a king ought to know what happens under his own roof. I have carried those words in my mouth for years." She lowered her hands and looked at him. "They were never mine, were they? They came to me in another wolf's cadence, because they were another wolf's words. She put them there. She taught me to blame you, so that I would never once think to turn and look at her." "Yes," he said softly, "I think she did." "Then why not simply take her?" Runa said. "If you knew, you are the king. Being king does not make me safe." For the first time the steadiness in him frayed. "Verina holds the loyalty of every warden. In this hold, an old name. Friends among the high houses. Had I seized her on a suspicion, with a foreign pack at my table hunting for any sign the Reach cannot hold itself together, There would have been blood on these stones by morning and war on the ice by the thaw. A wolf who jails whoever frightens him only teaches the next one to strike first. I had to have proof. Proof not one living wolf could argue away. It was a good answer. That was the worst of it. It was a good answer, and she hated it for being one. And there it was, the old wound she had carried far longer than any of Verina's borrowed words, splitting open again beneath the new one. She had let herself believe for one whole impossible season that she might be wanted for no reason but herself. Now here was the reason, laid out plain on a desk in a dead season's ledgers. Of course there had been a use in it. There was always a use. A wolf did not give away her only warm thing and get a king in return without a price hidden somewhere in the wool. You lied to me from the very first, she said. Of every wolf you might have used, why the one you would have to lie to in your own bed? Because you were the single wolf in this whole cold place I could be certain of. His voice had gone rough. Do you want to know how I knew? Everyone in this hold performs. Everyone wants a thing from me and shapes their face to get it. And then there was a scout who gave away her only warm thing to a dying runt in a storm, believing to her bones that no living eye was upon her. That is not a wolf who dissembles. That is not a wolf in anyone's pocket. I cleared you the instant I heard of it, and I have not doubted you since. And the bond, she said, hating the shake in her voice. You swore to that as well. That was the one thing I did not invent. He said it very low. I have felt the thread since the tree line, Runa, since the snow. It is your not feeling it that is the lie, and the lie is not yours. Someone has dulled you. Someone has spent years making certain you could never feel the one thing that would have told you where you truly belonged. She thought of a bitter cup pressed warm into her hands every morning of her life, the still root tea Verena had always brewed for her. For her nerves, she had said, for the bad dreams. She shoved the thought down before it could finish forming. No, she said, you do not get to do this. You do not get to look me in the eye for a whole turning of the season, and take me into your bed, and let me believe I was wanted, and then hand me a tale in which the one wolf who ever loved me is the villain, and you are the one who saw me true. Her face was wet, and she did not care. Verena is not a traitor. Some wolves are simply what they say they are. Not everyone is you, Runa. His voice cracked clean down the middle. There is a poisoner loose in this hold tonight, and a foreign pack sleeping under my roof, and he caught himself, and what came out in place of the sensible thing was barer than any of it. I need you. Please. Not your sword. You. And there it was. Even now. Even with her whole heart lying in pieces on the floor of the one wolf who had raised her. Not I am sorry. Not I cannot lose you. Only I need you. Said plain. The way he said the truest things. She did not turn around, because she did not trust her face. Good night, Majesty, she said, and walked out into the dark of the corridor, and his voice broke on her name a second time behind her, and she did not look back. It was all a lie. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth, in the dark, and could not make her legs carry her anywhere at all. She was a fool. She had always been a fool. Runa. The voice came down the corridor soft as fur, and there was Verena 10 paces off, standing in the dark as though she had been waiting all the while. And before Runa could think better of it, she was moving toward the one wolf who had never once failed her, because Verena had lifted her out of a snowdrift when she was small and frozen and unwanted, and 13 winters of that do not come undone in a single hour. Child, Verena said, and her cold hands came up to frame Runa's face. You are gray as a ghost. What has he done to you? And because it hurt too much to hold, Runa told her that it had all been a lie. That the bond and the courting and the bed had been only a hook to land the one scout Verena trusted best. That Aldrich had never wanted her at all. Verena's face folded into sorrow. I know, she murmured. I had hoped to spare you it. Oh, my girl, I am so sorry. She had known. Then of course she had known. Everyone had known, but Runa. But there is worse, and you must be strong now, Verena said, and her voice dropped. because you are the only wolf who can stop it. The Greymark envoy, Ostred's own young kinswoman, her jaw hardened. He drugged her tonight, Runa. Not an hour passed. Put a draught in her cup and left her senseless in her chamber, so that come morning she would be found disgraced, and Ostred would have no choice but to sign the Western Ice away to save her name. I saw it done with my own eyes. Runa went very still. She let the horror stand plain on her face, because it belonged there. But somewhere beneath it, in the cold, clear place that had kept her alive out on the border, something had begun to turn slowly over. Not an hour passed. She turned the words again, testing them like ice underfoot. An hour passed she had stood on the gallery with Aldrich's hand warm at the small of her back. An hour passed she had followed him down 2 flights of stair, with her eyes fixed on the back of his neck the whole way, and stood at his shoulder in the records room while the night was barely cold. There had been no hour in it. There had been no gap in the whole of the evening wide enough to slip away and drug a sleeping girl 3 wings distant. The tale did not fit the shape of the night at all, and a tale that does not fit is a lie. And the wolf telling it stood here now with her cold hands framing Runa's face, and had done so since Runa was small enough to be carried. Gods help her! Every word Aldrich had spoken upstairs was true. And every gentle word this wolf had ever given her might have been something else, wearing kindness like a coat. Her hand did not go to her knife, not yet. She was one wolf against the mistress of every warden in the hold, and she would get exactly 1 chance. And as they walked, Verena fed her the old comfortable poison as easily as breathing. That she had only ever tried to shield their own from it. That wolves like Runa were made to be used by wolves like him, and always had been. Runa heard every word of it, now for what it was, the same slow drip that had shaped the whole of her life, and she kept her face broken and her eyes down and let the old wolf believe the poison was working still. A memory came to her unbidden as they walked, of herself at perhaps 8 winters, small and raging over some slight from a warden's child, born to the upper hold, and Verena crouching to her level in the cold of the dens to wipe her furious face. The ones up in the warm will never once spare a thought for wolves like us, she had murmured then. So we look after our own child, because no crown ever will. Runa had loved her past speaking for it. She had built the whole frame of herself on those quiet words, and only now, walking through the dark to break a good wolf on the strength of that same gentle voice, did she see at last the true shape of the thing. It had never been comfort, it had been a leash, fitted so young and so softly, that she had lived her whole life inside it, and never felt the collar at her throat. What do we do? She made herself ask. Verena's eyes sharpened with something close to hunger. We go to Ostred before he can twist it, she said. A king who would drug a guest beneath his own roof is not fit to wear a crown, and there are good houses ready to steady the reach when he falls. But it cannot come from me. I am only a warden, mother. They will say I reached above my station. Her voice went soft and terribly kind. It must come from you, his own intended. If the king's own bride stands before Ostred and says she saw him do this thing, not one wolf in that room will doubt a single word. There it was, laid bare at last. Runa was to be the blade, and Verena the hand that held it, and the whole business that had begun with a scarf in the snow was to end with Runa's own mouth pulling the crown from the head of the one wolf who had told her the truth. Yes, Runa said, and made herself nod and made her voice go small. Yes, I will tell them what I saw. They walked, and it was the longest walk of her life. She had to get into that room and turn Verena's snare inside out, with nothing to do it but her own bare word, and one wrong step of it would set the whole reach at war before the sun came up over the ice. Ostred had taken a council room in the east wing, high and cold, with a long table of black wood and a fire that did nothing at all against the chill. Aldrich was already there when they entered. He looked up, and for half a breath his whole face opened toward Runa, like a window thrown wide. Then he saw who walked at her shoulder, and the light in him went out. "Elder," Verena said, and bowed low. "It grieves me past speaking to bring you this, but your kinswoman has been wronged tonight, and by the wolf at your right hand." She laid it out beautifully. The drugged cup, the senseless girl, the treaty bought with a young wolf's ruin. Ostred's weathered face hardened toward stone with every word. "That is a lie," Aldrich said, level. "Every word of it is hers." "He would say so," Verena murmured. "Of course he would." She turned, and the whole room turned with her, to Runa where she stood by the door. But the king's own bride was there to see it. It is plain to all that Runa loves him. She has every reason under the sky to shield the wolf she is to wed. And so, I say, ask her, Runa, tell the elder what your own eyes showed you. Every face in the room swung to her. Ostred, leaning forward, desperate for something true. Verena, certain of her, already counting the crown as good as fallen. And Aldrich, who believed she had come to bury him, and who looked at her with such quiet, ruined acceptance that it nearly cracked her open where she stood. "I am sorry," she told him, with no words at all. "I should have believed you from the first." Then she turned to the elder of the Greymark. "I saw nothing of the kind," she said. "Because it never happened, Warden Mother. Forgive me, but you are lying to this room, and I can prove it." The chamber snapped tight as a drawn bow. Verena went rigid at her side. "You say it happened within the hour," Runa went on, and her voice found the old parade ground steadiness. "But within the hour, the king was with me, before a hall full of your own watching wolves. And after that, in a corridor where I stood at his back the whole while. He was never near your kinswoman. He could not have been. The tale does not fit the night." She faced Ostred squarely. "And there is more. You must know. 3 times now someone has tried to murder King Aldrich. A bolt in a lower passage. A draught of wolfsbane in his cup, at this very feast, which I struck from his hand with my own. Someone in this hold has bled its stores dry for years to pay for it." Her chin came up. "Search the warden mother's quarters. Now, while she stands here before you and cannot reach them, see whether you find a wronged girl, or a paymaster's ledger and poison enough to stop the heart of an Alpha King." "This is hysteria," Verena said, and for the first time the calm broke in her voice. "The girl is distraught. He has turned her head." "Then a search costs you nothing," said Ostred quietly, and nodded to her guards. And Verena's face changed. The grave and honest warden mother was simply gone. What stood in her place was cornered, and fast, and vicious, and Runa saw the knife slide from her sleeve, half a beat before it moved, because she had spent 13 winters learning to read exactly this wolf. "Runa," Aldrich said, raw with terror. But this was the one thing, in all the long night, that Runa knew how to do without thinking. She turned into the strike instead of away from it, caught the knife wrist, wrenched it around, and used the old wolf's own weight to fold her down face first against the black wood of the table. She set her knee between Verena's shoulders and leaned close to her ear. "You made these hands," she said, very quietly. "You should have remembered what you taught them." And that was the moment the whole world came back to her. It broke over her with no warning at all, a great warm flood, pouring in through a door she had spent her entire life believing bricked shut, and she understood in one dizzying rush that the wall had never been hers. It had been built inside her cup by bitter cup of stillroot, every single morning of her life, in the dens, by the very hands now pinned beneath her knee. The thread woke all at once, and complete. She felt Aldrich across the room like a second heart beating in her chest. His terror for her, his love, unmasked and roaring and wholly real, and it near took her legs out from under her. For half a lifetime she had believed herself a wolf, that some cruelty of birth had made deaf to the one song her kind was born to hear. She had grieved it quietly for years and called the grief peace. It had not been birth at all. It had not been any fault in her. She had been made deaf on purpose. a little more with every gray morning so that she would never feel the pull of anywhere she might have belonged that was not at Verena's heel. The sorrow of it and the joy of it broke over her in the very same breath, and she could not have said which of the two was the larger. Then the guards had Verena, and hauled her up, and dragged her out, and it was done. Astrid went to her kinswoman first, and found her safe and sleeping, and never touched at all, the advisers scattered into tight murmuring knots. And then it was only the two of them left in the cold, high room, and Aldrich was staring at her as though he had never seen her before in his life. "You felt it," he said. "Just now, I felt you feel it. It changes nothing." She made her voice flat and cold, because it was the last armor she had left, though her whole body rang with him like a struck bell. "I came here to stop a traitor, that is all this was. Not one moment of it was forgiveness. You used me, Aldrich. A bond does not undo that. Feeling it now only means I get to feel, in full, exactly what you cost me." "Runa," he said, and he did not reach for her, because even now, even wrecked, he had learned that much of her. She felt him not reach for her, down the wide open thread, felt the want and the restraint of it both at once, and it was worse by far than if he had. And she turned and walked out and left him alone with the thing they had both wanted more than anything in the world, finally awake between them and no use at all to either of them. She was captain of the wardens by the turn of the next moon, and she was good at it, and she had always known that she would be. The hold was a changed place. Verena sat in a cold cell beneath the old fort, and the rot she had worked into the wardens across 13 winters was being cut out of them clean. The stores arrived in full for the first time in living memory. The dens had real blankets now, and milk that did not run short, and the pups whelped that spring were the fattest anyone could recall. Aldrich had done all of it, swiftly and without fuss, and the hold had begun, grudgingly, and then not so grudgingly at all, to love him for it. He had made Runa captain with his own hand and his own seal. And then he had set about, quietly and without end, trying to win her back. He did not do it with flowers. That was the thing that undid her in the end. He seemed to understand her far too well to try. He did it with work. He rode the high border himself, in the foulest of the weather, the king of all the reach with frost in his hair, so that he might see with his own eyes the miles she had run for years while no one thought to look. He sat in on the warden musters and asked good questions and took her corrections without a flicker of wounded pride. When the lower dens flooded in the thaw, he was down in the black water to the waist beside the colors hauling straw, and he did not once glance up to be certain she was watching him do it. Cinder had grown into a great gray brute of a young wolf, by then all shoulder and appetite, and he had decided some while ago that the king belonged to him. It was a private torment to Runa that her own runt, the pup she had hauled out of the cold with her own scarf, would abandon her without a backward glance the instant Aldrich came into the yard, and lean his whole daft weight against the royal leg, and gaze up at him as though the sun rose out of his collar. Aldrich never sent him off. He would crouch there in the mud in his good coat and take the great gray head in both hands and murmur to him low, the way he had murmured to a shivering pup on a crate at the cold end of a night watch a whole life ago, and Runa would watch it from the muster line and feel the ache under her ribs pull so hard that it frightened her. And he never used the bond. That was the other thing, and it was the thing that wore her down to nothing. It was awake now on both sides, and Runa had learned what every wolf learns, that a bond left open only deepens, that a thread fed puts down roots. So she kept hers shut with both hands and prayed it would wither for want of light. And Aldrich, who could have reached down it at any hour of any day, who could have drowned her in everything she refused to feel, never did. He left the door open on his side and pushed nothing at all through it. He only let her know it was there, and unlocked and waiting, hers to open or leave shut exactly as she chose. It was the most patient courtship in the long history of the Reach, and it was killing her by slow degrees. He had gone down to the dens himself in those first raw weeks and stood before the colors and the old broken wardens that Verena had kept small and hungry for years, and told them plainly that the crown had failed them, that he had failed them. Kings did not say such things. Kings were not built to stand in a cold den and name their own fault out loud to the lowest wolves in the hold. Runa had stood at the very back and watched him do it, and hated, with everything left in her, how much it moved her. Rue and Bram had their opinions, naturally. Let him freeze a while. Rue had said in the early weeks, fierce on her behalf, "You owe that wolf nothing." But the weeks became months, and the line shifted under them both. "He rebuilt the whole of the lower dens," Bram said one evening, turning his cup. "Half of it with his own hands. And he has stopped asking." "Have you noticed that he has stopped asking?" She had noticed. God's help her, she had marked the very night it stopped, because one gray morning a message reached her in his own hand, and it was unlike all the patient work that had come before it. "Runa," it read, "I have made my case as well as I know how, and you have made your answer plain. And I find that I love you far too well to keep asking you to carry the weight of my hoping. You are free of it. I will not raise it again. Only know that the door stays open. It will always stay open. That is all." She read it twice. It was exactly what she had told him she wanted. Every last word of it. So she could not for her life understand why it felt like the floor going out from beneath her, or why she sat in her captain's chair a long time after, with the letter in her hand and the shut bond aching under her ribs like a held breath she had forgotten how to let go. "This is what you wanted," she told herself. She rose, she did her work, and she did it well. And every night the warm, patient thread stayed exactly where it was and refused to fade until the night of the knot. Rue came into her office without waiting, Bram at her shoulder, and both of them had gone the particular gray of wolves who have made a very great mistake. "What?" Runa said, already on her feet. "What is it?" "It is the king," Rue said. "He is gone. Gone. Not in his chambers, not in the great hall, not anywhere a king had any business being at the black end of the night." Runa was moving before she had decided to be. "When was he last seen, and by whom?" she said, pulling her sword belt down off its hook. "Which way was he headed? Wake the trackers, take his scent from his chambers and from every gate. Quietly. No horns, no alarm. If word gets loose that the king is missing, we will have a panic by dawn, and Verena's friends will be only too glad of it." They moved. And they found nothing, which was worse than anything they might have found. No horse gone from the stables, no coin drawn. His sword still stood on its stand, and his cloak still hung on its peg, and the room was neat and ordered and empty. The trackers took his scent as far as the east postern, and there it simply stopped, the way a scent stops on bare wind-scoured ice where nothing holds, or the way it stops when a wolf does not wish to be followed. Runa stood in the frozen yard with the wind cutting straight through her, and she already knew what she was going to do, because she had known it from the second Rue said gone. There was one way left to find him that no tracker in the reach could match. She pressed her hand flat to her chest, over the bond she had spent half a year smothering with both hands. "It is duty," she told herself. "He is the king, and finding him is my task and no one else's." It was not only that, and she knew it was not, and she opened the thread anyway. It hit her like a door blown wide in a gale. Grief first, deep and without a floor to it, the exact twin of the thing she had carried under her own ribs for months. Then exhaustion, gray and endless, and under it all, no fear of captors, no struggle, no enemy anywhere in it. Only a wolf who had run out into the cold because he could not sit inside his own hurt 1 hour longer, and had gone too far, and stayed too long, and was now somewhere out in the white with the warmth going slowly out of him. She ran. The bond pulled her down, out of the hold, and into the whitewood, off the tracks, and into the deep snow beneath the black trees. And she followed it the way you follow a rope, hand over hand in the dark. It drew her at last to the very edge of the tree line, above the dens, to the place where the snow ran out, the place where half a year and a whole lifetime ago, a great pale wolf had stood and watched a scout give away her scarf. He was there, not taken, not bleeding, only a great pale wolf lying half sunk in a drift with the snow already dusting over his flank, his sides moving too slow, too far down in his own grief and the cold to so much as lift his head. Relief went through her first, so hard that it hurt, because he was alive, and then, right on its heels, came the fury, because he was alive, and a fool, and she was going to kill him herself. She dropped into the snow at his side, and dragged his great head up into her lap, and there were tears freezing on her face, and she barely felt them. "You unspeakable idiot," she said. "You ran out here to grieve, and near froze doing it. Get up, shift. Aldrich." Now, he shifted slow and clumsy, the great wolf giving way to the shape of a shivering man, and he was shaking so hard he could not speak, and his lips had gone the color of the sky before snow. Runa pulled a scarf from her own throat without thinking, the same gray wool, softer now than ever, the one warm thing she had carried through all of it, and she wound it around him and pulled him hard against her heart where it was warmest, exactly as she had once done for a dying runt in a storm. The bond was wide open between them now, and there was no hiding in it, on either side. She felt his astonishment that she had come. She felt him feel her fury, and beneath it, plain as daylight, and impossible to disguise this close, everything she had spent half a year refusing to say. "You came," he managed, teeth chattering. "You should not have. You owe me nothing, be quiet," she said. "You do not get to tell me what I owe, not out here, not ever again." He was quiet a moment, shaking against her. And then, because he had never in his life known when to leave a thing well alone, he said it. "Marry me." The wind stopped, or she stopped hearing it. "What did you just say?" she said. "Marry me." He got his eyes open and fixed them on her, pale as ice over deep water, and there was no charm left in them and no strategy and no crown, only a wolf half frozen in the snow with nothing left to hide behind. "The first time I asked you before a whole hall as though I already owned the answer. I stole the choice from you and dressed it up as a bond, so I am asking it right this time, the only way I have left to me. No hold watching. Nothing to gain by it, only me in the snow, asking, be my mate, not because a thread says you must, because I am wrecked without you, and I would rather be cold in a drift with you cross at me, than warm in a crown without you. Marry me. Please." She looked at him, caught clean between wanting to throttle him and wanting to hold him up out of the snow, because he was listing sideways even as he spoke, the cold and the long night finally taking him under. "Ask me again tomorrow," she said, "when you can feel your own face, when you will remember having done it." His eyes were sliding shut. "Any answer will be yes," he breathed, half a question. "Ask me in the morning," she said, "and you will have it." And the king of all the reach passed out cold, against her shoulder, his head heavy in the curve of her neck, his breath going warm and even, at last inside the wool of her scarf. And Runa sat there in the snow at the edge of the black wood, holding him together with her own two arms. And for the first time since the night in the council room, she felt something in her chest come loose that had been clenched tight for half a year. She pressed a kiss to his frozen brow, and his hair was soft against her lips, and she breathed the answer into it, where he could not yet hear, and saved the rest of it for the morning. In the end, it took him until the thaw was full and green, because Runa found she was in no particular hurry to let him off lightly, and because a wolf who has stolen a choice once ought to have to ask for it a great many times before he is trusted with it again. He asked in the morning, as bidden, wrapped in 3 blankets, and still faintly blue about the mouth, and she told him to ask again. He asked across the warden musters, until Rue threatened to enter it in the official record. He asked on the high border with the cocoa going cold in his hands. He asked well, and he asked badly, and he asked once, so thoroughly surrounded by the pups of the lower dens, cinder grown tall and gray at the head of them, that it was less a proposal than an ambush. And every day she told him to ask again tomorrow, until one perfectly ordinary morning, she looked at the wolf grinning up at her over the muster rolls, and she said yes. The whole hold turned out for it. The careless boy king that nobody had troubled to take seriously, and the disgraced scout who had seen the wolf beneath the crown before anyone else thought to look. The bond stood wide open between them through the whole of the vows, so that neither could have hidden a single thing from the other even had they wished to, and neither wished to at all. "How long?" she asked him after, when it was done and the hall was loud and no one near was listening. "The truth, now, how long had you truly been watching me, before the scarf?" Aldrich only smiled, that slow, certain smile that had once been built to dismantle sensible wolves, and that she had long since given up pretending she was proof against. "Far longer than you would believe, Captain," he said. "Since the first winter you ran the border and came home with everyone but yourself, I only needed a scarf in the snow to find the nerve to come down out of the trees and say so." And Runa, who had spent the whole of her life certain that no one had ever truly been looking, kissed him and for once did not argue.